Hi, I'm Katie and I'm the designer behind KT and the Squid. Welcome to the last week of the Leudinghause Crochet-Along. So I can't believe that we're almost done. All we need to do is block and then sew our sleeves into the body of our cardigan, and then we just weave in the ends and we're done. So right now you have your body piece and then you have your two sleeves. So what you're going to do is you're going to take all three of those pieces and you're going to throw them in the wash. Now you'll wash them just like you washed your gauge swatch. You can throw them in with some t-shirts or something. Avoid the Velcro and make sure that you have pulled in every last of those pieces of yarn through the last loop so that nothing comes unraveled in your washing machine. Don't worry about those loose ends. They're not going to come undone in the washing machine as long as you've pulled that last piece of yarn through the loop. And then once you're done with the washing machine, put it into the dryer. Don't forget to turn on that signal so that when the dryer is done, you can take your pieces out of the dryer while they're still warm. And then find some flat space. I just put them on my bed and make sure that they lay flat to cool, because if you let them cool in your dryer, they're going to get weird wrinkles, and because it's acrylic, you're going to have a hard time getting those wrinkles out. So it's really important to take it out while it's still warm and letting it lay flat to cool. Now once they're completely cooled, if you are steam blocking, you can go ahead and use either like an ironing board or some big surface, and you can go over all the pieces with your steam. If you're not steam blocking, which I didn't, you can go ahead and get ready to sew your sleeve into your body. Make sure that you have your knit clips or maybe a safety pin or just straight pins handy. If you need more, in the video, I only use one knit clip. Now, if you're making a larger size, or maybe you've never done a seam before and you think you need a little bit more of a guide, you can use more than one. You can pin the whole thing into place before you start sewing. That's completely fine. So here's a clip of me sewing my seam, and I say it in the clip, but just remember that I'm using a different color yarn to sew. Make sure you're using the same yarn as your cardigan, because the seam is kind of invisible, but if you use a different color, you are going to see that seam. To sew our sleeve onto our body, you're going to make sure that you have both the sleeve and the body of your sweater with the right side facing out. So make sure that your shoulder seam, you can double check that that's the right side, and then double check you have the right side of your sleeves facing out as well. Next, you'll need a piece of yarn, and it just needs to be long enough to go all the way around your sleeve cap. I usually cut a really long piece just to make sure. And for demonstration purposes, I'm using a contrasting color yarn. Be sure to use the same color as the yarn that you used for your sweater. So to start, we're going to place our knit clip to kind of set where we want things to go. So we want to find the center stitch of the top of our sleeve cap. And so you could count the stitches, but I go ahead and fold it in half. And I can tell right here, these are my two center stitches. So I will put my knit clip into the center stitch to the left. So next, I'm going to find my shoulder seam, and I'm going to put the knit clip into that last row before the seam, because that will be to the left of the seam. So I know that's where that stitch needs to line up. And so that's going to be my guide throughout this process. I start at the underarm in the middle, and then I work my way up, and then I'll take my knit clip out, and then I'll work my way back down to the other side of the underarm. So here I'm using a blunt yarn needle, and this is because I don't want to split my yarn. So it's best to use a blunt needle when you're doing this. So if I look at the underarm, I'm going to position this so hopefully you can see it a little better. So this is the underarm of my sleeve. You can see I have the 2 stitches that I skipped, and then these are the 2 stitches that I slip stitched into when I started the row, when we started to split into rows. And then here are my 4 stitches that I skipped for the underarm of the body of the sweater. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go inside out into, I'll start on the middle stitch to the left. So I poke it inside out, and then I'll bring it through, leaving enough yarn for me to weave in at the end. And then I'll go to this corresponding stitch on the underarm of my body. And again, I'm going to go inside out. So it's really important that you mirror what you're doing on each side. Now to lock this first stitch in, I'm going to do that again to the first stitch that I went into, and this is just to lock my stitch in. So again, I went inside out, and then I'll pull that tight to kind of lock things in. So next, I'll go into the next stitch. So again, inside out, and then into that second slip stitch of the underarm of my sleeve, inside out. And then I'll go ahead and pull that tight. And you'll see that this is almost an invisible seam because it'll hide in the stitches there. So next I'm going to start working up the side of my sleeve. And so basically we're going to start matching row for row, sewing up. But sometimes it might not quite be row for row, and that's where my knit clip is going to come in handy. See, I can kind of line things up and make sure that I'm on track for both sides. And if I need to grab more fabric from this side to make things line up a little bit, I'll be sure to do that. So as I'm sewing into the sides, I like to just grab a couple strands of yarn. So I'll go inside out on that side, and then again up to this row, inside out. And as you can see, I'm mirroring things, so it's almost going to come together like a zipper. And then I'll move up to the next row, inside out, and inside out. Hope you can see that. And I'm just going to keep going up, almost sewing this up like a zipper. And then once I get to, I've sewed up about an inch or so, I'll take my seam and I'll cinch it up. And you'll see it's not completely invisible, which is why you want to use the same color thread. And then every time I pull to cinch things up, I stop and I check using my knit clip as a guide to make sure if I'm on track or not. So I'll just keep going row for row here. All the way until I get to the top of my sleeve cap, and then things will change just a little bit. So again, see, I stop, I pull, and I kind of tug at it to make sure that it's kind of laying nice and flat. And then I check again to make sure, and you can see I need to be grabbing a little bit more fabric from this side, my body side. So I'll go ahead and do that. And what I'll do is I'll go into the same spot on this side a couple times to kind of make up for that. And be careful not to split your yarn because it'll just look a little bit neater if you don't split your yarn. So here I'm just about to the top of my sleeve cap. And this is where you kind of have to make sure that this is still nice and lined up. And so my next stitch, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into the top of the first stitch of my sleeve cap. And again, it's just you're going to go through those top 2 loops. And then do the same as you were doing up the sides of the rows, just grabbing a couple loops. And you'll do that all the way across until you get to your knit clip. And then once you get close enough to your knit clip where you can tell where those stitches should line up, you can go ahead and take it out. Move that out of the way. And then you'll just keep continuing to do this all the way to the other side, to your underarm. And then as I'm working down the other side of my sleeve, I'll line up the bottom or the underarm here, and then I'll kind of line this up as a guide as I'm going to make sure it's lining up just like I did coming up the other side using the knit clip as a guide. And then when you get to the very end, you can go through the very last stitch one extra time to lock things in like you did when we started. So as you can see with this seam, it's not completely invisible. Obviously you do not want to use a contrasting color for the seam, but I've already done this other side. And you can see when you use the same color, it looks really nice and neat. So like I said, the very last thing I do to finish my cardigan is to weave in the ends. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. So unlike seaming the cardigan, I like to use a needle with a bit of a sharper point to it. I like to use a metal needle. And that's because when I'm weaving in my ends, I like to split the yarn, and I think that just makes things a little bit more secure. So I have a knot here because this was a knot in my yarn, so I'll go ahead and cut that off. Now this is just a couple ends that I have here in my cardigan, and I'm going to double check to make sure this is my wrong side. So I want to make sure that I'm weaving on my wrong side. And I'm going to thread my needle with the yarn, and I'm just going to go through the fabric in any way that I feel that it's going to be secure. So I like to go just through, and I just basically bury my needle into the fabric, and I like to go probably about an inch or so. It's probably about an inch, and I pull my yarn through. Now every time I pull my yarn through, I kind of pull at it to make sure that it's not puckering or doing anything that's gonna distort my fabric. And then what I'll do is I'll change directions, making sure to go over the last loop I went under. And I'll go back up. I usually just go back up the same way I came. And again, I'll pull it through and kind of tug at it to make sure it's laying flat. And remember, every time you change directions, that's going to make this end more secure. So I like to go 1, 2, and 3. And I find that that's enough to secure it. And again, I'll just go one more time. And I really just bury my needle in there, splitting the yarn every few strands or so, and I pull it through. And then I do one more kind of tug, and I'll kind of lay it flat just to make sure that that's still laying flat. And then I just snip it. So I do that to every single yarn end that I have, and then my sweater is completely done. So once you have sewn in your sleeve and you went and you sewed in all those ends, trim them, throw them away, and then put your cardigan on and celebrate. I want you to take a picture of either just your cardigan, or you can be wearing your cardigan, and you can post them in the Facebook group, or you can make your project page in Ravelry. I want you to post those pictures because I want to see how your cardigans came out. I'm so excited to see them. So now that the crochet along is actually over, some people have asked, I will keep the pattern up on my website, and it will stay on there for free. And then you can still purchase the PDF. It will be complete now. I wanted to keep those available for everybody so that you can jump into the crochet along whenever you want. So thanks again for participating, and I will see you guys around. Bye.